very low light condition depending upon the density of the fog, and not much wind. Those are the fishing conditions you have, and it's early in the morning. Given that, bass, the thing that is odd about bass on a foggy day is they don't relate to, they don't bite the same if it's foggy versus if it's cloudy or rainy. Let's say, for example, if you're fishing down a nice bank or coming up on a point and it's a cloudy, rainy day with no fog, the bass, they tend to be a little bit more active. But one of the things I found out about fog is when you have fog, even if it's a thick fog, the bass are not quite as aggressive with that low light condition. And I think it's just the characteristic of the fog versus what a cloud condition looks like. I'm not really sure. I don't really understand how it impacts the bass, but I know in general, the bass don't bite quite as good in the same type of situation. In other words, say, for example, what I'm trying to say is say you're on a good topwater bite on a cloudy, rainy day, you're catching them on a Zara spook or something. If you have a foggy day in that type of a scenario, a lot of times they're not going to bite quite as good as they would on a cloudy day without fog. And a lot of times I have seen that is when you have a foggy day, it's clear, outside of the fog. So the density of the clouds are different. On a cloudy, rainy day, you may have a real thick density and you may have some big, thick cumulus clouds. But on a foggy day, it may be bluebird sky out and it's just foggy underneath it. So you have some different elements of barometric pressure. And I think that's one of the big things about it is the bass can sense that barometric pressure. Okay, now the first thing as far as catching bass in fog, you do have to approach it just like you're in a low light condition. So anytime that it's foggy, a lot of time, most all the time, if it's foggy, I'm using some type of a reaction bait, moving bait, spinner bait, chatter bait, crank bait, swim bait, glide bait, something like that. Simply because I think the fish do chase a little bit more. They are roaming a little bit more. Unless we happen to get a foggy day like in the springtime of the year, then I'll maybe start with just a jig. But probably, one of the best fog baits that you can fish is a spinner bait. I catch more fish on a spinner bait in the fog than I do a topwater lure for some reason. It just seems like it works a lot better. And as far as the areas to fish in fog, you don't have a big selection of the areas because depending upon the density of the fog, you can't just like run around like you would normally because you can't really see where you're going. Yeah, you can look at your GPS and you can say, okay, there's a point coming up here, but you still can't identify that very well. Again, depending upon the density